Hi, hi, Jeremy. This is Jeremy Clubb, owner of rainforestcruises.com. We've been friends for a while now. We know each other through a wife, Blakey, whom I've been a friend for 20 years and or more. Yeah, we met in school, and yeah, I met you just before we met, in Miami, just before the coronavirus. And that was a different time. So February, I think we met in February, March. Yeah.
Yeah, you dropped off Sophia to stay with us.
Yeah, she stayed with you. My daughter Sophia stayed with you, and that was just on the brink of chaos. It was just like I think few weeks away from everything really turning downhill. The business was I think normal, almost normal maybe at that point, and then So you own rainforestcruises.com, and you've been running that business for a while. You are I think a leader maybe in the rainforest in Amazon cruises, and through you I learned about this industry, which is like how they call it, river cruising and lake cruising, meaning it's different from what most people know is ocean cruising. And so I'm just wondering, what's going on with coronavirus in with tourism overall in USA, with your business. Probably it's not so good, I imagine.
So coronavirus has been extremely challenging, to say the least. And as far as Rainforest Cruises goes, we are entering our 10th year. So it was founded in 2011. So this should be cause for celebration, and it is, despite the challenges. But I think we're past the more difficult part. One of the To start from the very beginning, when we say Rainforest Cruises, we're talking about expedition style cruising. Mm-hmm. So that's a fancy way of saying small boats in hard to get to destinations, remote destinations, Amazon River, Galapagos, Southeast Asia. So you have the Mekong River that is shared by a number of countries: Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, China. You have the Irrawaddy River, which is sort of the spine of Myanmar or Burma. Coastal cruises in Indonesia, which is like sort of could be considered like an aquatic safari in a way. Big for diving, snorkeling, Komodo Island, these things. So cruising as a broad category is well known to everybody. I think the first idea that comes to mind is something that you would do like in the Mediterranean, Greek islands, big boats, 3,000, 4,000 people, the Caribbean. But expedition cruising is entirely different in the sense that the objective isn't necessarily leisure and partying or drinking or going from port to port. The objective is more interactive. So in one destination, it could be about wildlife. Take the Galapagos, for example. You have an archipelago of islands, and each island has a unique mix of wildlife. Some species of tortoise or finch or iguana are only found on that island within the entire archipelago. And so you go from island to island, and you're kind of in the footsteps of Darwin, let's say, and it's a hand-on laboratory of evolution. I mean, without saying that the origin of the species was sort of came to life when he visited Galapagos. Amazon, again, wildlife and culture and so on. So the style of tourism that we offer is for people that want to not only go to some place that sounds exciting and is exciting, but they want to learn and they want to interact, whether that be with people or with nature. And so that's what we do. In reference to coronavirus, it's been a challenge. The cruising industry in particular, I think, received a lot of bad press this year Everyone heard stories of ships being stranded, navigating around the world with no port to go to, and people stuck in their cabins. That was very damaging, generally speaking, to the cruise industry. Not necessarily for our industry, because there were a number of restrictions that came out from different institutions that put bans on cruising. Like here in Miami, you have companies like Carnival, Norwegian, Disney, that they couldn't operate for months, and in some cases they still can't. In our cases, because the ships were small, there were no restrictions, but people were still scarred. And so this year we saw really just a dramatic decline in demand. People unwilling to travel or couldn't travel because borders were closed. Fortunately, we're starting to see countries open up again. Destination countries, I mean, so like Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, they're open to tourists. Southeast Asia is a bit trickier because their style of lockdown is much more draconian, I'd say, than in the Americas. Vietnam, for example, completely closed the country. It was one of the greatest success stories in containment, you could say, because I think that they struggled with SARS, a SARS outbreak, to such an extent, whenever that was, 10, 15 years ago, I don't recall exactly the year. So they came from a position of experience, and they knew exactly what to do. So concepts like, social distancing and mask wearing, for them, these aren't new things. They do it anyway if there's not a pandemic. So those countries are opening up a bit more slowly, let's say, and they're being more cautious. The Americas are open. Tourism is starting to return, but there's some seismic changes in the way that people are asking about vacations. And so we find ourselves in an interesting position now, and this probably is a good segue into what you want to discuss as far as innovation and changes in industries. So nowadays people ask, instead of just joining group tours or participating in a fixed departure of any kind of boat in any destination, like they'll just book a cabin. Now there's a lot of requests for charters, and charters for families, or charters for close groups of friends, what they would call kind of multi-destination travel. And so we're seeing that, which is really a shift from like high volume, low passenger number to low volume, larger groups. So we've had to adjust, and that's still, like, the verdict is still out as to how this will play out and how companies will respond to this paradigm shift. But that's one thing that we've seen as far as a big change in coronavirus. I think that the idea that people want to be on a boat is alive. They just want to be on a boat in a different way and under different set of circumstances. Yeah.
So do you think these changes are going to stay? Meaning, after coronavirus, will situation come back at some point to how it was before, or it's forever changed?
I would probably say a mixture of both, and I'll explain why. So families, the multi-generational type of traveler, where grandpa goes with his kids and the grandkids, and they'll invite some cousins, and I think that type of style has emerged as a trend, and it's going to stick around. Now, on the other side of the coin, what's interesting to see is, let's say that the percentage of the population that doesn't fear for coronavirus as much, maybe younger travelers, they're more eager to travel in groups than before. And so that's the other emerging trend. Young people that want to be kind of like intrepid, let's say, and maybe they don't have a family that wants to travel with them because maybe their parents are nervous about COVID, or so they're like interested in traveling, and they want to travel by themselves, or are willing to travel by themselves. So they're looking for groups to travel with. So there's this, I'm noticing a kind of strange split in terms of the types of attitudes. So to answer your question, yeah, both. Requests for single travelers willing to share departures we're receiving, and these type of exclusive charters for extended family. What will happen after the development and distribution of a functional vaccine, which we're all reading about it in the press every day with Moderna and Pfizer, and Russia has its variety of a vaccine, and everyone's kind of rushing to get something to market. Whether those trends will stay that way once people have been vaccinated is it's too early to tell. And whether there's going to be further restrictions as far as some kind of COVID passport, that also remains to be seen, because this type of news comes out in small batches, and you have to piece things together to see what's actually going to happen. A lot of people, unfortunately, in this day and age, don't really trust vaccines for whatever reason. And they might refuse to get vaccinated and therefore may not be able to travel. Other people, higher risk people that have a bit more traditional mindset about vaccinations will probably be the first in line. So when that age group, that baby boomer 55 and over age group, has access to vaccines, and that's by and large the biggest market for cruising, if they will return to old habits, travel habits and consumption habits, I'm not sure. Well, I want to assume yes, but we'll have to see. Yeah.
Well, a lot of businesses, what happened, because I work with technology, so I noticed that, there is a good side of the corona, is that it accelerated technology change, drastically. The things that for us were normal like years ago, but it was like impossible to penetrate companies with. A simple example is the Zoom. It's like we were using it way before, and companies were like, no, Skype is fine, WhatsApp. And so now technology is penetrating very quickly into organizations, and industries, not, could be even faster, but it's accelerated drastically. Do you see any change like that in your industry?
I have. During the peak of the pandemic, a lot of companies were trying to fill the void, let's say, with virtual experiences. They would have camera footage or live cameras of a destination, where they would have kind of like, sort of 3D immersive type experiences. See Machu Picchu without being there, as an example. Mm-hmm. But those, I think, are a bit gimmicky. It was a way to make some noise and keep people engaged with brands. But ultimately, and you know this because you've traveled enough around the world, this isn't something that you can, it's not switching from a printed book to reading on a tablet. There's nothing really, my point of view on this, nothing can replace the raw feeling of going to a completely different place, eating different food, meeting different people, maybe having your wallet stolen, or meeting somebody you might end up marrying, whatever the case may be. There's no substitute for changing your geographic location in tourism. So that part of it, the logistics around moving the individual is there. What changes in tourism is the convenience with regards to choosing a place to visit, or in our case, the way that we invest in technology is access to information. So we have a database of boats. Let's say we have 70 boats right now, and we're investing in tools which will allow people to find a ship in a country and a departure and a cabin at the price that they want, and make an informed decision. That's how we're leveraging technology. And I think that the travel industry in general, with regards to technology, is all about delivering information. or quicker access to a service that you would want. When you think about technology and travel, the big names that come to mind, the big disruptors, let's say Uber or Lyft, obviously, Airbnb really changed the travel landscape, and the concept of vacation rentals in general. Accommodation providers changed the landscape, and what they've done, they haven't changed anything. I mean, people took taxis before Uber, and people stayed in hotels before Airbnb, and it just changed the way that they approached the destination. So people still went to Paris, and people still went to London, or people still, got a transfer from the airport to their accommodation, and all they did was create a platform that delivered, a convenient alternative or quicker information. So that's what we're trying to do, and it's not so easy in a very traditional type of segment of the tourism industry, because ultimately what we're offering is quick access, but the experience is still, you're still in a boat and you're still in a cabin on that boat. That part of it won't change. So it's just that 0 to 60 segment that we're trying to ourselves streamline, as it were, right? So if people arrive to our website, they see, wow, there's all these boats all over the world. How do we choose? Well, we try to help them along in that decision-making process. Quick access to the rates, to the discounts, to the promos, to the reasons you should choose one over the other according to your preferences. That's where we're leveraging ourselves as much as possible, in a challenging financial environment.
Well, I have several questions, because you're giving very nice, eloquent, detailed answers. So I'm like thinking about. So the first question is, obviously, I think technological change in businesses like yours, where you have a physical product, are a lot in either design of the product, or meaning the tools used to design the product or to market it. Yeah. And, obviously, for me, Airbnb is still very poor, because I was doing, these databases and stuff since 90s, so for me, it's still too simple. There could be so much more there, so much more recommendation information. I still spend too much time on Airbnb and Booking.com fighting with it. I'm too much so because they have so much units of information, but poor information, and it's not adjusted, not personalized, etc. They're missing a lot. They don't understand me, basically. While when you're working with customers, I guess you can cater much more to that. But first question: are you worried that Airbnb enters your business, or someone like that? Because as I understood, you're in the middle. You're not the owner of the real estate of the location. So, and that's what Airbnb did, and you are kind of the small Airbnb, but with added services, with customization. So, what stops Airbnb, just instead of houses, adding cruise boats?
They could. There's always the risk that as a small company, you get pushed out of the marketplace by a big tech company. From my point of view, the market of expedition cruises, maybe for a Google or an Amazon or a Facebook or an Airbnb or Expedia, Orbitz, whatever the case may be, I think that they're not properly at this point poised to cater to that type of market, because inherently, the decision-making process is still requiring human interaction. Yeah. For now, and I don't think that the market is big enough for a company like that to come in and say, it's worth our while to leverage and build out a new type of platform or bring in this product. Because I think the return on investment might not be attractive enough. It's bigger than what I can handle, but it's maybe too small for them. Yeah, I could be wrong. The other thing is that what you're dealing with is a huge number of small companies all around the world. These companies might have 1 or 2 boats. It might be one guy who has invested in a boat in the middle of the Amazon, and so to bring all of those people into the sphere of influence of a large platform is difficult. Booking has tried. Some of these boats you can reserve a cabin on booking.com, but it requires companies to have, dedicated departments to have inventory management, and they need to have access to tools, APIs, and software, because otherwise you have 10 people every single day manually updating inventory. A solution that would an inventory management solution specifically designed for small ships, right now it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
For the big ships it does. You have Amadeus, and you have these these just behemoth software global distribution systems that are used by airlines and car rental companies, the things that are driving those Expedias and Booking.coms. And they're not really catered to these small operators yet. Now, is there a risk that as the market grows, people will become interested? Sure. I mean, expedition cruising is a growing part of the travel industry, and you see big companies coming in. Celebrity, for example, cruises. Celebrity came in and they bought in the Galapagos. They bought another company, and that's a unique case study, the Galapagos, because there's severe barriers to entry, right? Like there are, I think, 104 licenses to operate boats in the Galapagos. There's a huge number of qualifiers. For example, you have to have a partner that's from the islands.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have, you can't have ownership without that partner. Just amazing environmental regulations. So you can't show up as a big player and just come in with huge boats, right? You have to basically buy your way in and then build up from there. Buy old boats, scrap them and use the license to introduce a new boat. And even then it's not that big of a boat. So there are barriers to entry. And I've seen efforts, Viking, for example, Viking cruises, they operate in Europe on the Danube and every major navigable river worldwide. They made an effort to come into the Amazon, but Viking has a very specific, formula to arrive at profitability. A certain size ship with a certain number of cabins and a certain occupation rate, and they weren't able to find that mix in the Amazon. And I saw the plans of the ships that they were attempting to build. It had a capacity for 200, 300 people, which is a average size ship for them, but it was too big. It was too big. So still, I think in terms of volume, to arrive at a conclusion to your question, I don't think the volumes are there for a big player to come in. I mean, it is a scalable business and technology is needed. But I think that they have, to put it in a simple way, maybe bigger fish to fry elsewhere in the travel space.
Yeah, I'm just checking out the experiences that Airbnb offers. I mean, Peru is I just now found a couple. Sorry, I know you're not, I forget, I should have checked Amazon, but I was just interested, yeah. Another question that I was wondering, I mean, I'm trying to avoid this question, going deeper into this, because let me ask you like this. So you feel confident that you're safe from a company like Airbnb? Because my experience when I'm looking at Google, Microsoft, and all these companies, I mean, they do have a tendency to pick on small things. They are, I mean, they're always saying, yeah, we want to be big. But then when you look historically, I mean, never forget that Microsoft was making a computer mouse, and they're making little games here and there, bizarre stuff. They had Expedia, as well. And I mean, Google was trying a bunch of stuff that really disrupted a lot of small businesses in Europe, basically ruining them, So, and then they just give up, and they try a lot of things. So you're saying that you feel pretty confident, I mean, at this point about your industry being safe?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that one can feel confident. I mean,
Yeah.
the global trend is that bigger companies are consuming smaller companies in an effort to stay relevant themselves, right? I mean, that much is happening, and it's unstoppable. I'm not, I can't say that I'm confident about anything. If anything, I'm hopeful that for another 10 years it doesn't happen. But once something gets, once you arrive at a critical mass and people take notice, a company like any of these that we've mentioned, at the snap of a finger, can leverage resources that I could only dream of, and swoop in and just grab it like that. So, we're trying to stay below the radar ourselves. Ultimately, this company, this project of mine, it never was something that I thought would become a publicly traded, it's a lifestyle company. I did it because I'm passionate about these locations. And I felt like ourselves, in a small way, could make a contribution through tourism to these remote areas, bring attention to environmental issues or deforestation or whatever. But, who's to say, if there could be a press release tomorrow that says, Bezos and Amazon decide to get into small boats, and they have an application that they put in, put out into the marketplace, and then, we would be irrelevant. So there's no guarantees in life, and then we just have to adapt. The one thing that we can do that a big company wouldn't be able to do is to focus on customer service and like a white glove kind of customer approach. So that's one way that we can defend our position, right? You have a group of highly trained salespeople that have physically visited all these boats. They can speak to clients with confidence and authority on the minor distinctions between one destination or one ship or one cabin versus the other. That type of experience is still difficult to deliver digitally. As you say, Airbnb, you have doubts about what Airbnb does. I mean, look at Airbnb, you have a map, you kind of see some photos of the properties, but it doesn't tell the story really in an effective way of why you should choose that house versus the one next to it. They don't talk, you can't call a person and say, look, is this street, does it have a bakery down the, these types of detailed questions we were able to answer manually over the phone. And that type of customer service, I don't think yet is something that they would be able to deliver. Of course, they could control the inventory, they could negotiate better prices, and they could, leverage some tool that, is better than what I could do with our resources, of course. But so I think that in that way, we were able to differentiate ourselves still.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question. So in some industries, what coronavirus crisis is doing is disseminating the small businesses. So basically, out of 10, 3 are going to disappear, 5 are going to be very weak, and the ones that continue are going to have a bigger market share. So do you see that happening with rainforest cruises, or in general with cruising?
Absolutely. So
in Italy, they say it's a race to survive. So those who survive the next 2 years, 21, 22, are going to have a bigger market share, are going to be much more successful than in 19. That's kind of the idea.
So in our case, absolutely, we've seen companies fold, like small online niche agencies have disappeared or are struggling financially. Especially those, like here in the US, we had a number of programs where you can ask for support from the government, whether it's payroll protection or SBA loans and things like that. These mechanisms, it varies greatly, but for the most part, weren't available to a company that might have been operating out of Peru or Ecuador or Brazil. And if they were, maybe they weren't as generous terms, let's say. So I've seen I have a few friends who own companies similar to mine, not necessarily dealing with cruises, but with travel. They've all struggled. Some of them have just closed shop because it was easier for them to just walk away and reinvent themselves elsewhere than it was to just continue to struggle through. I think there will be some consolidation in the industry where, you know, the market share is in, you know, fewer hands. In our particular case, and I think in travel in general, as you pointed out earlier, we don't control the physical asset. So what remains to be seen, even if we survive, which I'm confident we will at this point, I think the worst is behind us, but let's say that we get through this and we're midway through the year, it's really difficult to understand the liability related to all of the various partners and suppliers we have. So like I said earlier, we deal with now, you know, upwards of 70 boats. We could easily have 150 boats in a database, you know, as we grow. Who knows what their financial situations are like? So the risk, you know, there's risk at the front and there's risk at the tail end. Like I could have a lot of business in the first quarter of 2021, new reservations and everything. And you know, I can ask these suppliers what their financial situation is. Maybe they won't be truthful. We send some deposits to various suppliers expecting them to operate trips in the second quarter or the third quarter of next year. And who knows, you know, maybe they run into challenges, maybe they fold, maybe they end up having to sell off assets. So I think the risk, you know, downstream is going to be the new kind of problem for people in my position. Even if we happen to gain that market share, I think we need another 2-3 years to really be able to assess the damage that's been done. Mm-hmm. You know, with one thing is a hotel or, you know, a company of transfers from the airport, you have to maintain the cars. The inherent difficulty of expedition cruises is the maintenance. So I can't understate, when you have a $2 or $3 million boat in the middle of the Amazon, I mean, the elements are just eating away at that ship all the time. The batteries need to be replaced. The engine is corroded. I mean, all of the finishings peel away. These boats need constant maintenance. And if they've been kind of like with mothballs kind of put into storage for 6 months, the capital requirements to bring those ships up to sort of working quality are tremendous. And a lot of these companies, they won't have that amount of capital. Even if we were to recover to something close to the revenues that we had 2019, I mean, so that's now kind of like my concern. Not so much that people will start traveling again and people will spend money on going to foreign destinations, you know, that the suppliers that exist really are able to reactivate successfully. And then, you know, another interesting challenge, I don't mean to get too far off topic, you know, in a country, in a region like South America, where you have, you know, super specialized guides or crew of the ships, cooks, captains even, these people have been out of work for a year. And, you know, they don't have a lot of support mechanisms, you know, social mechanisms like we have in Europe or in the United States, where you can go to the government and, you know, collect unemployment benefits. Or so these people often have to just make ends meet any way that they can. So the other challenge is going to be to reactivate at the same level of quality in terms of customer service and technical expertise. I mean, I know of cases where you have, you know, cordon bleu trained chefs that were working on boats. You know, they're selling sandwiches out of their houses to make a living, or they've, you know, become taxi drivers, for crying out loud. Yeah. So to bring all of those people back into the workforce, retrain them, again, that's another huge challenge that we're not really talking about. And it remains to be seen, you know, what will happen with the quality of service to the client, you know, not only the quality of the accommodation itself.
So you're saying that peak was 2019, and you think that, you know, that peak is not going to be reached again, maybe in 2-3 years, and you still have to see how far away you are from returning to that peak. in terms
Yeah,
of suppliers and services and everything.
Next year, 2021. I mean, next year is in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Next year is going to be, a real challenge. And I don't, not that I'm pessimistic or anything. I think I'm realistic in saying that it's going to take a while. I don't think we'll return to 2019 traffic next year. 50, 60% maybe.
Yeah.
Will Disney World rebound quickly if there's a vaccine? Yeah, probably. I mean, the nature of that type of trip is different. Like we've seen in the US, domestic travel has actually grown through the pandemic, right? International travel is another story.
Belgrade was full of Americans, by the way.
Yeah.
Restaurants,
I mean,
I never seen, I've seen more Americans in Belgrade than in America.
Lately, you mean?
Yeah, well, because at some point Europe was closed, European Union was closed for Americans,
and so they went elsewhere.
Basically, there was like 2 or 3 places where everybody could go. I asked many of them, maybe 5 or 10 of them, and they could. And I saw the map. It was Serbia, and I don't know, like 2 or 3 countries here and there, like Mexico, maybe, and Iceland. I don't know, something like that. And really, Belgrade, like I think September was like so many Americans, was really a lot. I mean, it was great. It was funny. Like
I think
accent
in the beginning, I think that Serbia also had safer statistics with regards to COVID than other places, right? It wasn't like you hear about Italy and Spain, and everyone was quite nervous. Do I foresee a sort of reactionary boom in travel in general? I do, yeah. I mean, it's like anything. When people's freedom of choice is temporarily suspended or they perceive that it's taken from them, they want what they can't have, right? This is only human nature. You're told you can't do something, you immediately feel like you want to do that. So travel will rebound. I mean, travel has suffered through other challenges, maybe some more difficult in the past. I mean, 9/11, when they shut down air travel for such a long time. We've had pandemics in the past. I mentioned SARS earlier, so we've been through all of these things, and it always recovers. As soon as the coast seems to be clear, people come back, and they come back in a big way. So I don't think it's a question of that people can't afford it, because there's still, the US is still a wealthy place and Europe is still a wealthy place. People can. It's just once we pass this confidence threshold with regards to the vaccine, I think, things will change. And you can see the way that, equity markets are responding to all of these changes, and political changes in the US also, with now that we've gone through the elections and it's more or less, you could consider stable, I suppose, the transition. So
I can tell you that I never saved more money than this year, because I didn't travel. Usually travel. A few years ago, I just wrote down all my expenses. I just wanted to see what happens, and I realized that I spend a fortune on travel.
Oh yeah.
And this year, even though I did a cross USA trip, and we went to Rome, to Italy, to Belgium, all by March. From March until now, we haven't traveled anywhere. We were thinking to go to Egypt maybe, but since we couldn't go and see the pyramids, we could go to a resort, but you cannot go see the pyramids. And then also there was a lot of questions. What happens when you come back? Do you have to quarantine? So we haven't traveled at all. I mean, only internally, a little bit on weekends. So I saved, usually much more than I usually save, So that money, I guess, is going to go somewhere. But so when do you see the rebound, to come back to peak of 2019? Obviously not next year, not the next year, 2023, 24. What do you?
That's the $1 million question. It's hard to say. I think we'll see a rebound. So normally for us, and I think travel to South America and Southeast Asia in general, the peak booking season is the first quarter. So, really February, March, April is when you see a lot of reservations, because there's a lead time between when people decide to book and when they travel. The big travel season obviously is the summertime, right? Kids out of school and everything. So we'll know more by February, March. You know, from my point of view, if we even arrive at 50, 60% of what we did in 2019, that's good enough. Of course, I'd like to see something better than 2019, but you know, I'd rather be cautiously optimistic, and we just have to wait and see. What I can say is that prices have never been lower for travel, and I think that that's going to be a big determining factor in pulling people back into the marketplace. You know, because a lot of vendors are quite frankly desperate. So you're seeing things that are 50% off, or you pay the same price, but you get twice as much as a result. You know, 2-for-1s. Airfares are also, you know, considerably cheaper. You know, long haul flights between US and South America are half of what they used to be. So that's gonna be the thing that the deal seekers are going to be the ones that get the advantages there. And I think as soon as those deals start, you know, generating interest, people hear about, oh, I booked this trip to X place, and I, you know, normally it's 10,000 and I spend 5,000 or whatever the case may be. You know, people are going to have, you know, people get jealous when they hear about other people saving so much money on travel, and that's what's going to pull everything into the marketplace. So there'll be a period where discounts really drive demand until the momentum picks up. And the discounts in conjunction with good news coming out about safety and vaccinations, I think will be the thing that does it.
Well, okay. So when the coronavirus started, I defined it in kind of two phases, like three phases, I think. I think chaos, and then setting up of the new rules, and then the new rules, whatever they are, you know. So, and I think that setting up of the new rules is going to be at least twice as longer than the crisis, you know. So if the crisis is meaning total chaos is 1 year, then settling into the new rules is going to be 2 years.
Yeah.
And my idea is that companies that figure out what the new rules are, which could be very nuanced, you know, meaning some businesses you cannot change, but so the rules are going to be very nuanced. So you have to figure them out. Are going to be the ones that, you know, survive, because even if you survive the crisis, the chaos and stuff, you might still die. I think bigger danger is not understanding how the new business is going to work. Like what you were saying about the services over there and regulation and stuff like that. You know, it's very easy to make a nice website and to, I don't know, buy Google ads, but how do you understand the whole ecosystem, value delivery and all that stuff? So you have to understand the whole chain and the changes, you know. So I'm talking about open innovation as a way to figure this out, because it's really radical change on all levels. You know, previously when you had crisis, like it could be in USA or in banking or somewhere, but this is such a weird thing, you know, that's all over the place, and you're doing business in multiple countries, you're selling to one type of customer, working with a supplier in another place, etc. You have to coordinate all this. So what are your engines to figure out? What are your processes, your methods to figure out, you know, okay, what do I do next? You know, because, you know, now is the time, I'm guessing your brain is working like, you know, always has to be open to see what is the next thing, you know. And are you talking more to customers? Are you doing some research? Are you talking to your, you know, competitors who are maybe friendly, you know, like as you said, you had friends, I think they do the same business, you share information, you're talking to your suppliers, you know. How are you trying to understand, you know, what are the next year, 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever?
Yeah, well, the truth is, as you pointed out, the first year has been chaos.
Yeah.
And one part of that kind of chain of events that you left out was the denial phase. So I think everybody was in denial as well for the first 2-3 months that it would ever last this long. I never assumed that we would be in December and still be talking about this, right? So that's been really like, no one was able to really perceive the length of this ongoing crisis, if you want to call it that. One thing that I've noticed amongst my colleagues and suppliers and partners is that communication has increased. And so it's really like a situation where we've come to realize that the value chain exists, and it exists, you know, like the sum of all the participants is greater than the whole in that way. And we all really depend on each other. So communication has improved. We've all been having webinar meetings. Like, for example, we had with Ecuador, we had a webinar with stakeholders and the Ministry of Tourism and the regulatory body for the Galapagos. And they brought in some tour companies and they were asking our thoughts and we were asking what they thought. And that was good. It's been really interesting to see how each individual country is dealing with the crisis, because sure, you say that, you know, historically we've been through challenges, maybe in banking or maybe with terrorism or maybe with another situation. This is a global crisis and we're all facing the same set of challenges, but in a way it's really, really acute and regionalized in the response. So like I said earlier, Vietnam just totally shut it down, closed the borders, closed everything, mandated the masks. And if you came up with symptoms, they'd knock on your door and they'd take you away and they'd put you in isolation. Whereas, you know, a country like Brazil has this particular kind of leadership that, you know, is, call it what you will, they don't really value the Amazon, and they certainly didn't give, in my opinion, requisite importance to containing the virus. They've paid the price. But, you know, Brazil is a country where they were like, well, it's just a flu. Our borders are going to be open and we're just going to get on with life. You can argue whether that was a good idea or not. I mean, that's one of the countries that has been all over the news with high case numbers and so on. But at the same time, it's one of the countries that is receiving tourists now before others. So really, it's been, it's impossible for us to predict and anticipate. We can only react based on information we get from local authorities in every country. And you know, by and large, the recommendations have been the same, you know, as far as social distancing and biosecurity protocols and the mask, and you got to wear the face mask if you're flying. And, you know, we kind of try to generally consolidate these messages into one message to our clients, because we can't say, well, if you go to Peru, you got to do this, and you go to Brazil, you got to do this, and you go to Ecuador, this is the situation, and so on. It just becomes too confusing. So we try to generalize, and we take more or less the lowest common denominator of all of them, and we say, this is our suggestion for travel. But ultimately, we're travel experts and we're not virologists or working for the CDC. So ultimately, you know, the caveat is that they have to, you know, travelers need to be informed and they need to make their own choices. We can only really advise, you know, what we're required to do as travel providers, which is, you know, pack appropriately, you know, travel during the season, exercise whatever the CDC or whatever the governing body in your particular country advises as far as best practices for, you know, maybe it's the WHO, I don't know, and we'll see what happens. But needless to say, we've received a lot of conflicting information over the years. I mean, I remember a specific interview, Nicola, some spokesperson for the World Health Organization, European woman, I think she was German, I don't remember her name, but in the very beginning of the pandemic, where they said, you know, absolutely flying and traveling is okay. I don't know if you remember these interviews that came out very early on. It was with BBC or, you know, and she's like, you know, we did some measurements on the nature of the particles and how they're spread, and people can still fly, and it's totally safe to fly and travel. It's just, you know, it wasn't 2 weeks later that they came with total lockdowns, you know, of all the countries, which, you know, you receive a piece of information like that and you think, okay, people can travel. We just need to make some adjustments. And then, you know, that advice is bulldozed. And then a new set of criteria is put forward that we have to follow. So it's been reactionary. I think every type of company out there, not only for travel, has been just reacting to this as it develops. And, you know, it's tough. An interesting case, just last week, you know, Vietnam opened its borders again. And travel companies were like, okay, we have the criteria we need, we have the guidelines, we're going to start slowly receiving guests with appropriate biosecurity protocols. And then one flight arrived with one flight attendant who tested positive for COVID on arrival, or they, took temperature, something happened. And then boom, in an instant, completely closed the borders again.
Huh.
All international flights were suspended. So as much as you hope that you can consolidate information and try to plan, I mean, we're still in an environment where even here in the US this past week, you have lockdowns in the state of California. We thought we were starting to emerge from this thing, you know? And so that's why I'm very, very cautiously optimistic that there will be a travel rebound, but I don't want to assume that it's going to happen soon. And I just have to, I've been saying this all year. It's just, we're still touch and go, wait and see,
Okay. But it appears to me that you are, like much more open years out rather than business as usual routine. I mean, obviously, but that I think there is a change. My impression is that there is a big change in mentality. Let's say 2019, if I would, all the interviews I've done, all the people I spoke to, I think there was no concept of listening and being worried and looking around. They were all in routine, and their focus was on the 1%, 2%, 3%, but now everybody I talk to, I mean, I'm getting a strong impression. Everybody's much more open. Everybody's looking, front and back and left and right and trying to figure it out. And, the creativity and openness is like at maximum,
Yeah.
Obviously within context, you're talking about within the context of your industry, of your company. Mm-hmm. But I think if we did this interview, if we have done it 2 years ago, you would be able to compare them. You would see that you're talking in a different way, and I think there is that change. That's what I anticipated. That's my impression, that everybody's like much more, there is no routine anymore, which makes us smarter a little bit,
Yeah, well, you can't be. I mean, when you're in a company, you have a company, or you're working, and 7 years you just see, regular incremental growth. Your risk appetite is going along with that stability, right? Like you're thinking, all I need to do is leverage something, and we can grow more, and that's the mindset. Right now, when you're blindsided by something that, quite frankly, a global pandemic, if you had asked anybody even in January, they would have thought that that's a crazy notion. So I think it's been humbling, to be perfectly honest. Every business in the world, maybe with the exception of, digital delivery services, has been really just taken, caught off guard by this. And so it's like rediscovering the business cycle in a way. And people have come to realize that, I can't be as complacent as I have been in the past. And as far as like risk taking and innovation and changes go, a lot of people have different opinions on this. Like, I can give you an interesting example. So a friend of mine has a travel company. He doesn't deal with boats as much, but he sells customized packages to Latin America. And in the beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of discussions about, how we're going to get through this and what people are doing. And he actually was more energetic in the way that he felt he needed to respond to the crisis he was in, reading stories about how companies pivot, and, instead of being a fishing company that sells to the supermarkets, it was a fishing company that now with an app delivers seafood to your front door or something like that. And he was reading these stories and he thought, well, and he rightly identified a change in travel trends in the US, where people weren't traveling internationally. They were instead going to state parks and national parks and
Wyoming.
Yeah, Wyoming and all of these things, or California, hiking in the wilderness. And that did happen. And he tried to pivot to sell packages to, wine country in the US or these things. I don't think it worked out, because I I think people, Americans in the US don't need the services of a custom travel advisor to go to California. They might need that to go to the Pantanal in Brazil, you know, different language, different currency, different everything. So I think that that didn't work out. And he advised that I do the same, to focus on boat trips, you know, in, let's say, North America, on the Great Lakes or on the Snake River, Mississippi River. I didn't do that. And at the time I was regretting the choice, but now I'm kind of thinking that it's a good thing that we didn't attempt to pivot, because ultimately, you know, I put a lot of thought into it, and a lot of companies have a very kind of rigid vertical that they exist in, you know, and I thought we're in a risky environment globally. Travel is down. It's not the time to go all in on a concept which, you know, quite frankly, we don't know if it's going to work. So my response to the pandemic really was, you know, to hunker down, you know, cut expenses, reduce unnecessary anything, and try to preserve capital as much as possible. And the way that we did that was keeping the clients we had already sold. That was the biggest challenge this year. Forget about new business. You know, sometimes just keeping the business that you've done in the past is good enough. And so a lot of travel companies had, you know, cancellations. You know, big Airbnb suffered massively because of cancellations. You know, airlines had cancellations. They weren't giving refunds. They were giving vouchers. A lot of hotels suffered from cancellations and refunds. And, you know, if you don't have revenues, refunds can be devastating. So we put all of our effort into customer service. So we started calling our clients, explaining what we can do. We would offer upgrades, you know, change their travel date from 2020 to 2021, maybe take advantage of a lower price. So we poured our energies, instead of pivoting into a new market, we pivoted kind of, it was like an internal pivot, if you want to say it like that, and just retained the clients we had. And I think that wasn't necessarily a brilliant move, or it was just a gut reaction, you know. But I think that's what helped us kind of like change our panorama into the future in a way, because we have the same clients. We put them to travel next year or even 2022. So we have this revenue stream, you know, built in. Granted, they're old clients, but, you know, they have to make final payments, and that brings in cash flow in the future. And we were able to get them cheaper prices in many cases. So what we did was, that's how we responded to it. You know, now we've done that for all of our existing clients that haven't traveled. Now we need to look at new clients, but it was a way for us to kind of keep ourselves engaged and keep ourselves busy for 6 months. Yeah. You know, it's what it is, but we come full circle. Now we've done that part. Now we have to just focus on the first quarter, and I'm as eager to, I'm very eager to see what will happen.
Well, I spoke to Tom, he's a friend of mine from UK, and he asked me, I mean, some of my friends and my clients started asking me about the war, because we went through the, you know, they see similarities, or I don't know, I'm interesting to them because of the war. And I keep saying one thing, for us, the war was not an issue, you know, because wars are very short, very aggressive, but very short. They're crazy and short. The more people forget that our country was in a huge financial crisis for a long time, you know. So I went through that even before. I also was through 2008. I went through 2008. My father kind of, you know, went from very rich to normal. I went through .com crash. I was very lucky to move away from Milan to Veneto, to more stable companies, so I didn't feel that. Although I saw a lot of my friends really go from very high to very low. And but I went through financial crisis in the 90s, starting in 90. And that was very interesting because that was long. You know, it was kind of very similar to this because it was very deep. You know, it was like not something that's going to go away like in 6 months. And what I noticed is that even within a year, people are, as you said, denying, you know, because they have savings and they were still like, you know, their memory was in having parties a year before and enjoying. And the real crisis happened second, third year. That's when things, especially the third year. So looking at my business, I mean, we have specific contracts, seems okay. Some clients stopped, but I think unfortunately they're going under, as well. But for various reasons, coronavirus was the tip of the iceberg, in some cases. Sure. But businesses that were not ready digitally really suffer now. And I'm not talking about adopting Zoom. I'm talking about serious, like digitalization of everything, which takes decades to invest every year. Yeah. But I think I'm afraid of the 2023. That's, like if what you're saying happens, like now there is a rebound, because if travel rebounds, I mean, for sure, I mean, that's a luxury thing. I mean, everything's going to go fine, So, but what I'm afraid of is that is other issues, It's like if what's going to happen if that doesn't rebound. Also, if it rebounds with rich people who can travel anywhere, because what I notice is that I think one of the marketers were saying, I think Scott Galloway or someone was saying that the top 10% are not affected at all. I mean, they're just bored, So but that doesn't mean that the other 90% are really, really in deep trouble. And that's what you said, people that, I mean, who's going to drive your taxi? Who's going to wash your room or whatever, So that kind of supplier thing, that's very interesting what you said. Like your thing is okay, you're surviving, but the suppliers over there, people are actually doing the work, you don't know what's going to happen. The ships are going to sink, and I mean, I own a river boat, so I have a house on the river, and I know the maintenance is very serious issue, that's very expensive. Yeah, so those are good points. So I don't know, I mean, I see you very optimistic. I think that's great. That's our role. We have to be very optimistic and constantly calculate everything. And I hope it's that way. But I still think that we're in chaos. And chaos was 1 year. And I think figuring things out is going to be 2 years, because people have savings and they have memory works in a funny way. They're still in routines of 2019, because that's what they want. And it's going to take, like people still didn't believe the crisis. Every time I was in crisis, so this is my fourth big one in my life. Every time there is this concept of people not believing it. Like people don't believe it, even when they're like up to here. They're like, no.
They put the blinders on.
Yeah. So that's I think the biggest issue that's going on now. And I've been told the whole year what a dooms person I am. Everybody's been telling me, like, you're very negative, you're this and that. Like everybody thinks it's gonna go back, but I don't know.
I mean, I think there's always a kind of an invisible risk in these big crises, like in the banking crisis. You mentioned 2008, 2009, the mortgage crisis. I mean, you had people that over leveraged themselves to buy homes, and you had fraud on a massive scale with regards to mortgage applications and approvals and property valuations. And all of these things went through the banking system, and the government stepped in and backstopped them, and the too big to fail and TARP and asset relief programs. But all of that damage was still there. It was on the balance sheets of some of these companies and on the balance sheets of a lot of governments. Think of Spain, think of countries that took a long time to recover, Ireland, Spain, Italy, they were calling pigs at one point, Portugal. And it took a long time. So this is, again, why I think that we don't yet know the impact of all of this crisis on consumption and governments, because, the US, they're talking today about spending another $800 billion. The European Union is trying to negotiate a huge bailout package. So I'm thinking, like, in a macroeconomic sense, even beyond the fact that a boat in Peru doesn't have an updated paint job, or the engine, it needs maintenance. I'm thinking, like, down the line, from here, you're saying 2022, 2023. I think the paradigm shift is real, and the birds are going to come home to roost at one point, and who's going to pay for all of this, right? Yeah. Like we're going to have an inflationary reaction. We're going to have, people's personal budgets are going to be impacted because they're going to have to pay higher taxes, property taxes, income taxes. So this remains to be seen this expansion that we've been in for 10, 11 years now, since basically Obama's first term, his 2 terms, Trump's, first, it's a big question. What like the unending truth of the matter is that, as you say, wealthy people will be wealthy. They earn their wealth through investments and through stock markets, and regular people earn money through wages or salaries. Those people will be able to travel. In our particular case, we're not a high volume business. We're a low volume, higher price point business, so that inelasticity is there to help us. And again, like I said, customer service, dealing with clients that have more money than they do time to plan is really our bread and butter. So we don't need a lot of clients ourselves, but the ripple effect of travel in general, which does depend on volume, we need to see how this plays out. These are the things that keep me up at night, because ultimately, mass tourism is what allows all of the rest of the niche providers to survive one way or the other, on the periphery. So these are the risks that I see. And
that's a nice thing you said, that mass consumption makes luxury available. That relationship is often forgotten, that you cannot have better things unless you have all the other things. It doesn't work, because there is a lot of money and innovation and movement, coming from that other 90%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Well, I hope everything it's even better than you anticipate. I hope travel rebounds. Hope it works out. It's too boring sitting at home. Yeah.
People want to travel, and in this day and age where everyone looks at Instagram and there's some person in a bikini in a pool in Bali, take that for what it's worth. I don't subscribe to these things, but now more than ever, the notion that your quality of life is related to access to sexy places, that's a trend that's going to be here. And people will find a way to afford it one way or the other, even if they can't, So it's a status symbol now to show off your experiences. I think more than brands and expensive things, I think people show off how worldly they are. So that's supporting the whole thing. And always time will tell what happened. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time.
Sure, thank you. This was a cool project, and I look forward to seeing this when you publish it and the other interviews you have.
Well, what I'm really sorry is that you're doing the interview about this negative stuff. The stuff I really would like to talk to you is the relationship between, the environmental goals and the business, and that aspect of the business, and how about your passion about the rainforest. It just turned out that because of this crisis, we are talking about how can we make money with the global pandemic, so
survival.
That's, in my mind, this is maybe the most boring thing you and I can talk about, but it's kind of, but it's kind of impossible to ignore today, because you're in tourism in States, in South America, etc. So it's kind of like, if I don't talk about it, so hopefully we'll do soon what I think is a proper interview with you, is about your passion about rainforest, why you started the business, and how you relate your business to the local society, to the local environment. And I think that's much more interesting, that relationship between entrepreneurship and that.
That conversation is super fascinating, and I'd be happy to have that one. I don't make as much of an impact as I would like, ultimately, because we're very small players, but we're a part of the whole. And, you've heard stories about, Africa, for example, the safari business, which is tens of billions of dollars annually in revenues, does so much to support wildlife and to support natural areas, right? They provide employment, they keep anti-poaching rangers funded, people go to see giraffes and elephants and the big cats of Africa, and they didn't have those revenues, and you saw like direct negative impact from an increase in poaching this year. You know, all you have to do is Google it for 1 second. So it's true that tourism has its bad sides in terms of carbon emissions, or destruction of overuse of UNESCO sites, wear and tear, and these things. But the other side of the coin is that in remote areas, it's really one of the few economic activities that delivers financial aid straight to the source.
Great. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's a thing. I mean, I knew it in back of my head, but it was not so.
It's not something that's easy to quantify, but it's there. Yeah. It's there.
No, for sure. I mean, I know from townships in South Africa. I mean, that I'm always thinking, what can people in townships do to increase their revenue? And I mean, they do lots of arts and crafts, which is sold to tourists.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, that's tourism is the one thing that's that can help them, because you're being exposed to another culture, and that's of great value. People are. I mean, I would pay more for that than for new clothes or something like
that.
Oh,
sure. Yeah, that's the feel good part of it. Traveling is there's an inherent selfishness in travel, because it's me, I want to see and feel and touch and everything. But I think in the future we'll see more emphasis on traveling with a purpose. Whether that's to this happens everywhere, but you bring materials to schools. A lot of the itineraries we offer visit NGOs that are providing education in rural areas, providing education to farmers, teaching them better practices, giving them opportunities. Instead of hunting or fishing or chopping down wood, you can get a job as a guide, taking people to the places that you would have extracted from. That's the fun part of this job, knowing that directly or indirectly there's an impact, a positive impact on the ecosystems that people are going to visit. That's why I like ecotourism. All kinds of tourism is interesting. You can go see the Eiffel Tower, and it helps the French government, supports restaurants and hotels and shops. But the type of tourism we do is really like injecting something directly at the site in a way that's, I think, has a stronger multiplier.
Cool. Well, that's the interview I hope we do soon.
Sure.
When this burden is out of the, or maybe sooner, I don't know. I know.
Tourism for change, and I can give you some friends that you can also speak with.
Well, maybe there can be more. I've done interviews with like 9 or something, 10 people. I mean, they're fun. They're fun interviews. When there is more people talking.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much, Jeremy. Say hi to Blakey and everybody. And,
I will.
And talk to you soon.
Thank you, Nicola.
Ciao. Bye.
Ciao. Bye.